And now Sid Vicious up on top.
These videos are not for children. If you are a children, then piss off.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, VInfuso. And I've gathered some of the best in all of the internet wrestling community to help me comprise the ultimate list of the worst in all of professional wrestling history. We're brought together to talk to you about the matches you've already forgotten and the ones you wish you could forget. These Botchamania-worthy full-length matches from all around. So enough promo time, let's ring the damn bell and get right into it. Wrestling, like all media, changes over time. Well, some things about wrestling change over time. My point is, what sells in the 2020s isn't exactly what sold in the early 90s, late 80s. And for some reason, WCW decided to turn 1996 into 1966, as the product's main event scene played out like a season of the old Batman series. You might as well have called the company Hulk Hogan and Friends. Hulk Hogan continued the dominant reign that he saw back in the WWF, now in WCW, showing that no matter what company you're in, Hulkamania is indeed still running wild. Hogan quickly became every babyface's best friend and every heel's worst nightmare. Upon entering the company, Hogan ran through the top baddies WCW had to offer at the time, and he did so at rapid pace. So the company, in their infinite wisdom, decided the only real threat to the real-life cartoon character would be to create an entire league of people who wanted to kick his ass. A stable of epic proportions in length, but not so in quality members. Yeah, that's right, Hulk Hogan alone was so much of a threat that it would take the likes of the Saturday morning cartoon show villains, the Dungeon of Doom, and the legendary Four Horsemen pre-Mongo to come together to stop him. Hogan, knowing that he needed help taking down the live-action Legion of Doom. No, not those guys. These guys. Would team back up with Macho Man, allowing the Mega Powers to realign. The two went one-on-one, or more accurately, 8-2, against their dastardly foes in a Doomsday cage match. What is a Doomsday cage match, you ask?
What?
Well, you remember those triple cage matches WCW used to do in the early 2000s? Okay, well imagine one of those, but worse in all conceivable ways possible. It's less of a cage match and more of a fenced-in tower. And there's levels to it, and you're locked in there. The two of you, Macho Man and Hogan, are locked in there with 8 men who want to kick their ass and another 3 managers on the outside trying to help those men. So yeah, it would seem like the Mega Powers were at a disadvantage, but it's important to note that one of the Mega Powers was Hulk Hogan, so really, you know, it was the other team that was doomed from the start. I just imagine like Hogan and Macho Man teaming up kind of went like that one scene in Spider-Man 1. You know, somebody saw the Dungeon of Doom fighting Hogan, like all of them against him at once, and they were just like,
Help him!
Which one?
do you remember when John Cena nearly single-handedly took down the entire Nexus by himself? This was pretty much that, but times a million. Except everyone cared significantly less because the Dungeon of Doom was involved. You know, if Wade Barrett was in the Dungeon of Doom, I'm sure this would be a completely different story, but that's not the case here. As soon as the match starts, on commentary it shouted, "Where is Brian Pillman?" At home. Like the wise madman he was. He knew better than get involved with this shit show. He wanted no part of this. And secondly, no disrespect here, but Brian Pillman? Do we really need to add another guy to this match? Is that necessary? Don't get me wrong, the loose cannon is in the high end of my top 10. But I think that's more than enough. They already have a 6-person advantage on the Mega Powers, with another 3 outside the ring. I think they're gonna be fine. The whole ordeal is so bad that I'm not sure that it could even be considered a wrestling match. No wrestling actually took place within the 25 minutes this was afforded. The audience was silent. Not that it mattered because the company was clearly tone deaf to put this out in 1996. There's a lot of hits and jabs and walk around brawling because really, what else are they gonna do? With how flimsy the cells are that they're walking in, I mean, really, what could you do? And even the few bumps that are taken are typically either missed by the camera, which is constantly frantically trying to find a way to fit 14 people on screen at once. But even when the cameramen do capture the anarchy, it's still hard to see because you're just looking through and across at your neighbor's fences. I don't know what to do with this. The whole thing is just a mess. It's utter chaos. And not the fun kind. No one seems to know what they're doing. You know, everyone just looks like they're winging it. It's bad enough that someone would book such an event on a pay-per-view, but to think that this isn't even just a match on the card, it's the main event. There's a lot of talent involved with this match. It's just too bad that there's no talent to be seen within it. I don't want to add insult to the insult of a match that this is, but the more I watch it, the more I realize it's starting to resemble the crappy backyard wrestling me and my friends used to do when we were younger. If we have a lot of things happening all at once, maybe no one will notice that we suck. They fight through different levels of the cage, getting out at random intervals and then making their way out of the cage and up the entrance ramp, back into the ring, and then they go back and do the same thing again and get back in the cage. Some of the members get locked on different cage floors. New guys come out as if they're just entering the match at some point in time, even though they were brought out at the very beginning of the match. I just don't know what's going on here, and neither did anybody involved either, apparently. There was a point in time where a man was literally being dangled for dear life. I was getting some MJ with his baby flashbacks seeing this. I was reliving that moment. A man's life almost ended here, and I felt nothing. I felt nothing at all. I was unchanged. Because I was so disappointed in seeing all of this that I honestly didn't care if I ever saw Kevin Sullivan after this again. I was fine with it. I was at peace. My memory of him, whatever good there was to it after I saw this, it was gone. This match is actually so bad, it's no joke, no hyperbole. The whole reason I wanted to make this list. I think it's one of those so bad it needs to be seen to be believed type matches. I could go on and on with everything wrong with this match. But instead, I think the best way to properly describe its awfulness is to describe in excruciating detail everything that I liked about this match.
There is nothing.
Hey V, thanks for inviting me on this video to look at some bad wrestling matches. I'm going to go with Warrior vs Hulk Hogan at Halloween Havoc 1998, a match that completely destroyed a lot of people's childhoods. Hogan vs Warrior back at WrestleMania 6 was one of the most legendary nights in the history of wrestling. Many felt the torch was being passed to the Ultimate Warrior when Hulk Hogan dropped the WWF Championship in the Toronto Skydome on April 1st, 1990. But when we look back at the match today, one thing that stands out is how Warrior and Hogan controlled the audience that night. It wasn't a technical masterpiece at all, but the fans were so invested in the outcome that everything Hogan and Warrior did got a great reaction. It's a great showcase of the simplicity of professional wrestling. Fast forward 8 years later and the wrestling landscape is way different. You've got Hollywood Hogan leading the New World Order, and the last time we saw Warrior, he had an underwhelming WWF run in 1996 that ended prematurely. It's been reported that Warrior agreed to come over to WCW on one pretty big condition: he would have to lose to Hollywood Hogan on pay-per-view. Of course, WCW also really felt that Hogan vs Warrior would draw a big number, and the financial investment would be worth it in the end, and I'm sure Warrior wasn't too concerned about losing to Hulk, seeing he was getting paid a ridiculous amount of money, no matter what he said in interviews afterwards. So yeah, WCW was banking on nostalgia being enough to make fans order Halloween Havoc 1998 on pay-per-view. Fans were supposed to feel like the old days had returned on October 25th, 1998, but instead, fans felt a strange mix of sadness and embarrassment as the Hulkster and the Warrior stumbled through a 15-minute matchup that was really shit. The competitors tried to recreate the classic WrestleMania 6 Test of Strength bit and nobody cared. They done a crisscross spot that looked really comical. One of my favourite parts was when Warrior transformed into a log and he rolled into his opponent, tripping up the Hulkster in the process. But the one thing everyone remembers from this matchup was when Hogan tried to light some flash paper to throw at Warrior and the spot was completely botched. The match ended with a run-in 2 from Horace Hogan, so there wasn't even a clean finish. Take away all these obvious moments too, and even the timing was poor during the matchup. Everything was just off from bell to bell, and even the atmosphere inside the arena was pretty bad too. The Warrior said he showed up to Nitro the very next night, and apparently there was nothing for him to do, so he got on a plane and he went home, never to be seen in WCW again. As for Hollywood Hogan, well, he got what he wanted. He got his win over Warrior, and ultimately, we were the ones who paid for it. No doubt you're going to see even worse matches during the course of this upload from an in-ring perspective, but what makes this one stand out is that it was Hogan versus Warrior. It was a rematch from a classic WrestleMania main event. We were sold on one of the biggest rematches of the 90s, but instead we got to see two guys who didn't have that same control over the crowd as they did back in 1990. Warrior summed it up best when he said he had the best match of his career against Hulk Hogan, and he also had the worst match of his career against Hulk Hogan. But anyway, thanks again for having me on, V, and hopefully I can stop by again soon.
Kevin Nash and Triple H have a long storied history, being two members of one of the most legendary behind-the-scenes group that went on to become two of the most legendary on-screen groups in the NWO and DX. There is absolutely a storied history there. But what's not there is a long history of successful matches together. The two powerhouses and real-life friends have stood toe-to-toe on multiple occasions, but never did it create fantastic results. They had what is seen to many as one of the worst Hell in a Cell matches of all time. To be fair, it's not so much that it's bad as it's kind of just, uneventful. It's a very, by-the-numbers standard Hell in a Cell match, and it kind of lacks the right amount of oomph to really put it over the top. But it would seem that having one of the most boring matches in one of the most entertaining match types of all time wasn't enough for WWE. As nearly a decade later, they decided to put the two in the ring again, and this time add a ladder into the mix. Now, ladder matches are typically for high-flying moves and gravity-defying spots, so it's really not often that you'll see men like Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Big Daddy Cool Diesel in one of these. And if you did see one of them in this type of match, typically you think they'd be facing someone with a little bit more experience in this field, just to properly balance things out. But here, WWE thought, fuck it. And why not? Because at this point in time, the 2011 Kevin Nash experiment had fallen flat on its face like it was another NWO revival. Nash was brought in to feud with WWE Champion at the time, CM Punk. And then that rivalry turned into Triple H facing CM Punk. And then that rivalry turned into Triple H facing Kevin Nash. So you try to make sense of that. Because even those who created it couldn't.
Whoa! Are you kidding me?
The match obviously lacks the excitement of typical ladder matches. The two seem to work the match around the ladder as opposed to with it. Their slower pace and brawling would be fine for a standard one-on-one between the two, but during this match they almost completely ignore the stipulation and only occasionally remember what type of match it is they're in. Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels, this was not. The thing is I just don't get it. Who saw Vinny Vegas and Terror Rising and thought, oh, you know what match these two should work? Were they expecting Nash to hit a swanton? Did they think Triple H was going to pull out a 5-star at some point? Or was there a plan in place to try to get Scott Hall to show up and nail a 450 splash?
I don't know!
This match, much like Nash's entire run at the time, was a major disappointment. And mind you, I went into this with no expectations and they still found a way to disappoint me. Oh, and this wasn't your typical ladder match with two men who have very little experience in ladder matches. Oh no, this was a special stipulation match. This was a sledgehammer ladder match. Meaning you had to climb the ladder and grab the sledgehammer that was twirling in the air. So essentially, this was an item on a pole match masquerading around as a ladder match. A special stipulation match. Oh, good. So now you may be asking yourself, how does one win such a match? Was the goal to take the sledgehammer down? Does the bell ring after you retrieve the weapon? Or do you have to hit your opponent over the head with it first? Well, the answer is neither. It goes to a pinfall finish. Of course it does. None of it makes any sense, and all of it's bad. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
What's up? This is Jim and Tyler from the Suplex City Limits podcast, the original pro wrestling podcast. And we are here tasked with the ill-fated Scott Steiner and Triple H matches. Let's do this shit. One fucking take. Boom. Tyler, what do we got?
First things first, you got to know, Scott Steiner and Triple H, the match is absolutely fucking dreadful. Scott Steiner came into the WWE out of shape and is immediately thrusted into the reign of terror that is Triple H circa 2002 to 2000 and whenever. You know, obviously he was blown up as soon as he hits the ring, but then he's got to work 20-minute matches with Triple H. It's like, come on.
That's just Triple H being a dragging him out to deep water, knowing he can do that.
Yeah, 100%.
Scott Steiner doesn't work 20 fucking minute matches.
He never has.
He came in, he was over as shit with that crowd. I mean, he was the Scott you liked from WCW. And then it quickly went away with a bunch of silly shit, arm wrestling and pose-offs. And the finishes of those matches, Triple H wins the first one by DQ and wins the second one by using the belt. Shitty.
So shitty, in fact, he would never touch the main event ever again in the WWE. The only other thing of note he would do is befriend some testicles, and that's about it. My main takeaway from Scott Steiner circa this era, like there's an image in my head of Scott Steiner's thumb just right up somebody's hole. Like they're wearing tights and his thumb has just disappeared. It's gone.
Check your Earl, dude.
Welcome to Shoney's. Delicious food and friendly service since 1947. Now serving prostate exams from the one and only Scott Steiner.
So if you haven't seen this match, I don't suggest it. It's fucking terrible.
I remember seeing just the image of No Way Out with Scott Steiner on it on their website, and you could order it online. Right? That blew my fucking mind because I lived in this bumfuck nowhere town in Newfoundland, Canada, where I couldn't get the pay-per-view. I seen that and I was like, I gotta order it. I gotta do it.
There was only one television in town, eh? In Bret Fred's house, we'd all gather around. We'd all huddle around in Bret Fred's.
You're pretty right, except for his name was Craig. So, what's up, Craig?
Yeah. Yo, shout out to Craig. How you doing?
How you doing, man?
Well, this is about as stupid as you'd expect from us. So, thanks to V for having us. And don't be a backstabbing, butt-sucking bastard. Join us live every Saturday at high noon Eastern on YouTube for the SCL Wake and Bake Show, where we wake, we bake, we talk all kinds of shit on the week in pro wrestling. Check that shit out. Hey, man, pack that ball up again.
Okay, so this world title match and pay-per-view main event was never going to be any good. There was no chance of that going into this. It took place right before or during that god-awful Fantastic 7 or Magnificent 8 or whatever the fuck they called themselves storyline, and WCW at the time was on its last leg. And by the end of the match, they wouldn't be the only one, but we'll get there. So in this fatal four-way match, you had Scott Steiner, who was probably the highlight of the Dying Company at the time. You had the former psycho but still vicious Sid. You had Slapnuts himself, Jeff Jarrett, and you had some mystery opponent who Ric Flair was managing, which is, a great way to sell a pay-per-view. Hey, you don't know who's in the main event, but buy the ticket anyway. From jump, we're off to a bad start, as Jeff Jarrett's music and Ric Flair's promo consecutively cut off Michael Buffer's introductions. And then we find out that the Mystery Man is a no-show. This isn't anything new for the company, because at this point in time, Shenanigans was really the name of the game. Like, once in a while, wrestling would happen, but for the most part, it was just everyone swerving everyone, and you couldn't keep up with it, and nobody was trying to. Even the match setup to this is just all over the place. As Jarrett and Steiner are supposed to be kind of friends, even though Jeff's competing for his belt in this match, And Sid Vicious is supposed to be this big baby face, despite the fact that everything about Sid Vicious has always screamed heel. The match is just your garden variety of bad. A whole lot of nothing happens, time passes, I'm bored, some moves land, others don't, the audience is dead. And then they cut to the back where we see Ric Flair's Create-A Wrestler enter from a limo. And by time we come back, Sid is laid out with his legs looking like a limp pool noodle. Now, granted, I should mention that when I decided to watch this for the list, I was actually watching the Peacock WWE Network version, where they cut out the devastating moment of this match altogether. I find that really funny because I remember when this happened at the time, there was the exact opposite approach. Yeah, instead, commentary decided to replay this about 6 or 7 times, all from different angles, and then you got like different speeds. They do it in regular motion and then slow motion. They really wanted to hammer home. They wanted to make sure the audience understood that this man just broke his leg. In half, really.
My leg!
In case the image didn't speak for itself, they decided to speak over it and replay it several times. So it's just funny to see this completely different way of going about this event. Though to be fair, at this point in time, the clip has been played to infamy. And how could it not?
Look at that thing!
And what's even worse is they couldn't call the match off because there was more story to tell. And so instead of, getting the guy to the fucking hospital, before he goes into shock, it was instead decided to go through with the finish. A finish that would see the masked man enter the ring and beat down Sid. Except now he gets into the ring and just, throws a couple lazy kicks to the already grounded Sid, who's trying to act shocked and also take a beating, while coming to terms with the fact that he has no control over one of his legs. Actually, he doesn't fully have one of his legs. And after this lazy beatdown comes the big reveal of the former Legion of Doom member. Yes, actually that one this time. The former Legion of Doom member, Road Warrior Animal. He then turns and hugs Scott Steiner and Jeff Jarrett, swerving the audience who did not care either way.
Hey there, this is Brian Zane from Wrestling with Regret, here to talk about one of the worst wrestling matches of all time. I've been given the assignment of the San Francisco 49er match between Jeff Jarrett and Booker T from the October 2nd, 2000 WCW Nitro. This show took place at the Cow Palace in Daly City. San Francisco is the next town over, which I think is the only explanation as to why it's given this name. Basically, here's how we got here. So the week prior, Vince Russo had won the WCW Championship under the screwiest of circumstances. 1 week later, he vacates the championship because he doesn't want it. He doesn't want to be the champion, which is just a great endorsement for the championship belt, might I say. So anyway, the belt is now vacated, and now Booker T and Jeff Jarrett, who've been fighting over this belt since the summertime, are going to be fighting to see who will become the next champion. Now, Vince Russo, this match is one of the most Vince Russo things ever, because it's not just a single pole in the corner of the ring, it's 4 poles, bro. You got poles for days, and each pole has got a box hanging from the top of it, and it's holding either a weapon or it's holding the World Championship. I guess they called this the San Francisco 49er match, not only because this show takes place in the San Francisco area, but also, the name 49ers comes from the miners who came down during the gold rush, and I guess getting treasure out of a box is kind of like mining for gold. I love before the match begins, Scott Hudson speculates on commentary there may be a hand grenade in one of those boxes, but Tony Schiavone has to let everyone know, fans, there's no hand grenades in the boxes here. So, first big move in the match is an Irish whip into the turnbuckle, and one of the boxes falls to the ground. And they break the box open, and it's a blow-up doll. Mark Madden calls it a Kimberly action figure, which is kind of gross. Booker opens box number 2, and it's a framed picture of Scott Hall, and Booker T's face really tells a story there. It's an iconic moment. And by the way, Scott Hall was not part of the company at this point and was never coming back. Booker grabs the third box, and it's a coal miner's glove. Actually, a pair of coal miner's gloves are in there. And then all this time passes where they basically have, it's a tale of two matches, because the first half of the thing is just boxes 1 through 3. They burn through those. And then for the last box, which everyone knows is the World Championship now, presumably, we just get a full match on our hands. These guys are spending most of their time on the outside fighting. There's a pile driver on the announce table, fighting with the coal miner's glove, some more finishers, some more wrestling. It's amazing how much time they kill when easily both guys had many chances to just grab the box and win the championship. Finally, Jarrett's fighting for his guitar under the ring, but something is holding on to it down there. It's Beetlejuice from the Howard Stern show under there, and what a dead giveaway too, because they showed the replay of Jarrett hitting Beetlejuice before the match, apropos of nothing, so that's how you know Beetlejuice is going to be a factor in this matchup here. So he helps cost Jeff Jarrett the match. Booker T grabs the last box of the belt inside. Oh, but the belt slips out. Wouldn't you believe it? The belt slips out of the box as he's trying to get to it. Now, keep in mind, the rule is the person who touches the championship is the new champion, but you got Dave Penzer, the ring announcer, reaching up, grabbing the belt, handing it to Booker T. Technically, Dave Penzer should have been the champion there, but he was robbed. Booker T then grabs the belt, so he is declared the new world champion, a 3-time champion. But just before the show goes off the air, his new rival, Scott Steiner, shows up, beats the crap out of him with a lead pipe, beats up Beetlejuice as the show fades to black. And that was the San Francisco 49ers match. I mean, it was just one of the wackiest matches, just so unnecessary to add these ridiculous things like the poles and the weapons inside, and how 2 of them were kind of joke weapons to begin with, and how flimsy the boxes were. I mean, these guys had to sell this flimsy-ass wood like it was death, and just stretching all that time when they could easily grab those boxes, just wasting time. And they tried their best to try and shove a match into what is this otherwise gaga bullshit spectacle. They did their best, but they really couldn't help the constraints of what this match gave them.
Now, while that was a bad Jeff Jarrett match, it was at least a Jeff Jarrett match. You see, WCW's chosen one, Jeff Jarrett, was booked to go one-on-one with WCW's golden boy, Hulk Hogan. The match began and ended with Jeff Jarrett laying down, letting Hogan get the 3 count, having him win the belt, and then having him bolt away from the company. It's funny because still to this day, there's various different stories on the whole ordeal. No one could ever seem to agree on what exactly happened that night, including those involved with this match. Some say it was a work, others say it was a shoot. And if it was a work, booking a world title match on your pay-per-view and instead swerving the audience just seems like a terrible business strategy. Why would your audience ever trust you again? That's like telling your kid you're going to take them to Chuck E. Cheese's for their birthday and then instead taking them to a pet cemetery. Yeah, that's where your puppy's buried. Swerved you little mark. Your dog's dead, now enjoy your cake. You can understand how an audience would be upset by that. And what's even worse is this wasn't the first time that the company did such a thing. As a matter of fact, it wasn't even that long since the last time the company did the same exact angle, having Hulk Hogan come to the ring and lay down for Sting for the belt. Once again, on a pay-per-view. And that event wasn't even that long after the whole finger poke of doom incident. So yeah, all of them. They're all bad. Non-matches suck.
The worst match ever. Man, that is one really tough question just because it's really hard to narrow down. Think about it. There are plenty of professional wrestling matches out there, and on top of that, the worst is subjective, and it all depends on who you ask. And since I'm the one being asked, I'll tell you right now, I probably have a longer list to choose from than your average person, as there's a lot of matches I really don't care for. So, if I had to narrow things down to just one, well, how do we do that? Do we go with wrestlers who you really can't stand being in the same bout? Do we go with something that disappointed you and was a total letdown? Or do we just choose something that was really poorly executed? Well, I say, how about we go with all 3? Which is exactly why I'm choosing as the worst match of all time, Brock Lesnar versus Bill Goldberg, WrestleMania 20. First off, I am not, nor have I ever been, a Bill Goldberg fan. And the worst part is, recent matches have shown you that after over 20 years in the business, he still somehow has no idea what he's doing in the ring. He's notoriously unsafe, ended Bret Hart's career, and Goldberg has always been WCW's golden shovel. But if WCW Goldberg wasn't bad enough, the only thing worse would be WWE Goldberg. And even though he's had a ton of stinkers in World Wrestling Federation, well, his matches against one of my other least favorite wrestlers of all time, Brock Lesnar, definitely has to steal the show. And sadly, this awful pairing has happened way more times than it should. But the reason why I'm going with this match at WrestleMania 20 over every other match they had is because this one was sadly and somehow the most disappointing. I kind of figured the rest of them were going to suck. At WrestleMania 20, I myself, like many others, actually thought there was a chance this match could have been good. It featured two wrestlers who were stars from other companies who never got to interact with each other, both powerhouses, and at the time, Brock Lesnar was actually good. This was a rare stinker where he really didn't do a lot of wrestling moves, phoned it in, and clearly didn't care about the people who paid to see him. Little did we realize that this was going to be the status quo for Brock going forward after his return. Goldberg was true to form, not knowing the difference between a wrist lock and a wrist watch, and Brock magically forgot how to do wrestling moves. Unless, of course, giving the middle finger counts as one. Now, to recap the circumstances of this match, this bout was going to be the last that both men had in the company for a very long time. They were both leaving WWE, and in which case, Vince McMahon was stuck in a very hard position trying to figure out which of these two do you put over. Now, I dare not subject myself to rewatching this match because, again, it's my least favorite. But the way I remember it, both men spent the majority of the bout just antagonizing the crowd and laughing to themselves on the inside knowing that they couldn't get fired. Ultimately, WWE decided to book Goldberg to go over, figuring there was a better chance of getting him to resign than Lesnar. Shows what they know since Brock was the one who actually came back first. In the end, the fans were the biggest losers on this one because that hot New York crowd knew about the backstage circumstances and were going to let both men have it. And even the desperation play done by WWE of putting Stone Cold into the match just to give some cheap pop stunners really didn't help to make this any better. And out of all the craptastic matches that these two have ever had, this one definitely is the worst because it was the only one that I actually had my hopes up for. Man, I learned my lesson on that one. Never again, Brock and Goldberg. Never again. V, thank you so much for having me back on your channel to talk about the worst match in wrestling history. And if any of you guys want to check out my channel, then go over to Dave Knows Wrestling. I really do appreciate it. Thank you again, V, and back to you.
I was such a mark when this match came out that I remember being upset. I was upset that the year Shawn Michaels was retiring was the same year that Bret Hart made a brief return to wrestling, and the company didn't think to have them be each other's last match. Oh, how angry I was. And while poetically that would be perfect, in execution, it would be dog shit. Bret Hart hadn't wrestled in years. He was out of shape, and he had to retire previously due to injuries. There was no reason Bret should have ever been in a ring in this capacity ever again. And then to think that he could keep up with Shawn at the time, who the year previously was having one of the best performances of his career against The Undertaker? Laughable. Anyway, let's get this out of the way. I know I mentioned this earlier, but it's true here. This match was never going to be any good. And I'm sure that Vince knew that going in as well. This wasn't one of those performance-heavy matches. It was a spectacle. This was less wrestling and more entertainment. Unfortunately, it succeeded in being neither of those two things, but that was the intent behind it. Bret being past his prime and physically unable to compete went one-on-one with Vince McMahon, who made a wrestling career being past his prime and unable to compete. And they met in a no-holds-barred lumberjack match with the Hearts at ringside. That stipulation was added day of. Like my desire to see another Bret and Shawn showdown, this was poetically perfect. But there was no excellence in the execution of this. I've heard a lot about WWE pulling guys who they feel aren't medically cleared for a match. But I'd really like to know what that testing is like, because if one of your workers in the match has to literally take a seat and take a breath mid-match, maybe they shouldn't be in said match. I don't care who they were, that's not who they are today. Like the first match I spoke about, it's hard to also call this a wrestling match. As with everyone involved, nobody looked like a wrestler, nobody dressed like a wrestler, nobody wrestled like a wrestler. But on second thought, it did have Bruce Hart in a ref role, so I'm going to go ahead and take this off the list and give it a 5-star rating. Would have been even higher if this took place in the Tokyo Dome. In all seriousness and all things considered, after really rewatching this match and taking it all in, I would say it's a solid 4 out of 10. So with that being said, those were some of the worst matches in all of wrestling. I want to thank everyone who joined me here today on this video. Their links are all in the description below. Head on over to their pages, hit those big red subscribe buttons, and don't forget to let them know who sent you. And if you'd like to see the series continue, go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. There's a lot of terrible matches out there, and there's a lot of other wrestling YouTubers who are going to join me in watching them. Anyway, with that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, VNfuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was VNfuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bad time. Same bad channel.